The sharp click of heels against cracked pavement echoed inside Margaret Collins's head like a dull rhythmic ache. 9 days. 9 days of silence in the apartment she once called home and now thought of as a mausoleum. Behind her walked Ryan, Victor's son from his first marriage. A boy she had seen once every few years at holidays, who now, after the funeral, had somehow forgotten the way back to his rented room on the edge of town. "My legs are killing me," Margaret said without turning around, her voice flat. "There's some ointment at the apartment. I'll take a look," Ryan replied shortly. His voice was too calm, too steady. The women gathered near the building entrance fell silent all at once, as if on cue. Mrs. Adler from the first floor stared from beneath her knit hat, then deliberately turned away and spat onto the ground. A chill slid down Margaret's spine. Not from the cold. From that sticky, wordless judgment that would now follow her everywhere. They stepped into the elevator. The cramped space smelled of cheap cigarettes and burned wiring. Ryan stood too close. His shoulder, wrapped in a black leather jacket, brushed hers. Margaret didn't move away. She didn't have the strength. The apartment door creaked open with its familiar sound. Victor's shoes were still in the hallway. Ryan nudged them aside with his foot to make room for his sneakers. The gesture was so ordinary and so brutal that Margaret caught her breath. "Go into the kitchen. I'll put the kettle on," she said, shrugging off her coat. Her hands trembled. The buttons wouldn't cooperate. "Back first. Sit on the couch. Where's the ointment?" Ryan interrupted. Margaret obeyed. She perched on the edge of the old couch, her stomach tightening with a mix of exhaustion and embarrassment. Ryan returned from the bathroom holding a tube of strong menthol muscle rub. The sharp scent of alcohol and mint filled the room, drowning out the faint powdery smell of her perfume. "Lift your dress a little," he said, crouching in front of her. She whispered that she could manage on her own, but Ryan cut her off. "You can't reach. Come on." Slowly, inch by inch, she raised the fabric. Her back pale, bony. The vertebrae visible beneath dry skin suddenly felt indecent. His hands touched her lower back. First the cold burn of the ointment, then the heat of his palms. He wasn't just applying it, he was rubbing it in firmly, in slow, circular motions. Margaret bit her lip. It didn't hurt. That wasn't the problem. It was too intimate. Too right and too wrong at the same time. "Your skin's really dry," he said quietly. "You don't take care of yourself." She rushed to explain Victor had been sick for so long there was never time. Never energy. "He's not sick anymore," Ryan replied. "Now you have to live." His fingers moved higher, toward her shoulder blades. A tremor ran through her body. In the glass of the old cabinet across the room she caught their reflection. A pale woman with streaks of grey in her hair and a young man with broad shoulders. It looked like a frame from a movie that shouldn't exist. The doorbell rang, loud, insistent. Margaret startled and tried to pull her dress down. "Stay there, I'll get it," Ryan said. He went into the hallway without bothering to put on a shirt. Margaret heard voices. It was Linda, Victor's sister. "Why are you dressed like that?" Linda shrieked. "Where's Margaret? Is she even alive? Or are you already celebrating?" "Linda, go home," Ryan answered calmly. "Margaret is resting." "Resting?" Linda snapped. "The whole building says you've moved in. Have you no shame? 9 days since her husband died, and she's already dragging some kid into bed." Margaret stepped into the hallway, adjusting her clothes. Her face burned. "Linda, stop it. What are you saying?" Linda shouted that she could see everything with her own eyes, accused Margaret of trying to sign the apartment over to her stepson. "Leave," Margaret said softly. "Just leave." Linda spat onto the welcome mat and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Silence filled the apartment. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, watching her. There was no pity in his eyes. There was something else. Calculated. "Now everyone will know," Margaret whispered, sinking onto the bench by the door. "So what?" he replied. "Why should you care? Margaret looked at him and understood something with equal parts fear and relief. Ryan wasn't going anywhere, and the worst part was that she didn't want him to. The kettle began to scream on the stove, slicing through the thick silence of the apartment. Margaret stood by the window, watching the small courtyard below. On the familiar bench, the court had already assembled 3 neighbours, with Linda at the centre. They weren't hiding it. Fingers pointed openly toward her windows. Margaret stepped back into the shadow of the curtain, her body trembling with a small, humiliating fear she couldn't name. "Sit down," Ryan said, slapping the table with his palm. "The tea's getting cold." He had already poured himself a large mug. He grabbed the sugar bowl and dumped in 3 heaping spoonfuls. Victor used to complain that sugar would kill him, and Margaret had trained herself to add barely half a spoon. Ryan ate greedily, the way young men do. He tore off a piece of stale bread and chewed, staring at her without blinking. "Your hands are shaking," he said. "Did you check your blood pressure today?" She said she hadn't had time. "That's not something you ignore," he said. "Get the cuff." Margaret pulled the old blood pressure monitor from the cabinet. Ryan took her wrist without asking. His fingers were dry and warm. He rolled up the sleeve of her house dress. Again, that contrast his tanned, solid arm against her thin, paper-like skin. The Velcro ripped loudly in the quiet kitchen. Ryan pumped air into the cuff and watched the gauge. 140 over 100, he said. "Too high. Where are your pills?" "In the cabinet. Blue box," she answered. He stood, and Margaret followed his movements with her eyes. He walked through the apartment as if he'd lived there for years. He returned with a tablet and a glass of water. "Take it, and I don't want to hear another word about Linda. She's nobody. Just a woman who didn't get any inheritance." Margaret tried to say that Linda was Victor's sister, that it wasn't right to talk that way, but Ryan cut her off. "People talk when they've got nothing to eat. When they do, they eat and shut up. You just live." He sat down again. The silence in the kitchen changed, grew heavier, stickier. Suddenly, Ryan reached out and placed his hand over hers. Margaret froze. She should have pulled away, should have protested, should have remembered the 9 days. She didn't move. "You think I'm here for the apartment?" he asked abruptly. "Aren't you?" Her voice cracked. "You have debts, Ryan. Loans. Everyone has debts," he said. "I'm here because I have nowhere else to go, and you shouldn't be alone." He leaned closer. "You cry into your pillow at night. I hear you through the wall." Heat rushed to Margaret's face. The shame was unbearable. "You need sleep," Ryan said, standing, still holding her hand. "Go lie down. I'll clean up." She stood obediently. Her legs felt hollow. The bedroom smelled of old wood and mothballs. She lay down on top of the bedspread. Through the open door she heard water running, Ryan washing dishes. Sleep came heavy and thick. She dreamed of Victor. Then his face shifted, slowly, into Ryan's. She woke at dusk. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed. "Sleeping?" he whispered. "It's late. The neighbours left. The bench is empty." He brushed her hair gently. "You know," he said quietly, "my father never appreciated you. Always complaining. And you're beautiful, in your own way." He leaned closer. Margaret smelled his skin. He didn't kiss her. He pressed his forehead against hers. There was so much desperation in that closeness, so much forbidden hunger that her head spun. "Go," Margaret whispered. "Ryan, go." "I'm not going," he said. "You know that." At that moment, a key scraped loudly in the front door lock. Margaret went cold. The door swung open and the hallway light snapped on. "Mom, are you home? Why is it so dark?" The voice of Emily, her daughter, sounded brisk, confident. Ryan slowly straightened. Margaret bolted upright, fumbling with her dress. Emily stood in the doorway with a travel bag. Her eyes locked immediately on Ryan, who followed Margaret into the hall, barefoot. "What is this?" Emily went pale. "Ryan, what are you doing here at night? Wearing Dad's things?" The bag dropped to the floor. The sound against the linoleum was sharp, like a gunshot. Are you out of your mind? Emily hissed. 9 days, Mom. 9. And you dragged this vulture into Dad's bed? Margaret tried to explain her back, the ointment, but Emily didn't let her finish. Helping? She snapped. Look at him. Some tragic hero. Ryan, get out. Now. Ryan didn't move. I'm here by invitation of the homeowner, he said calmly. And I'm just as much an heir as you are, sis. Heir? Emily laughed bitterly. You're broke. You're here for the apartment. And you, she turned to her mother, are you really that blind? The whole building is already talking. Margaret covered her face. Shame. Exposure. Enough, Ryan said loudly. Shut up. Your mother turned into your father's shadow for years while you were out living your life. Don't you dare lecture me. Kick him out, Emily screamed. Or I'm never coming back, and you'll never see the kids again. Margaret lifted her head. The kids, she said slowly. You brought them once a year, always busy. Ryan isn't leaving. He has nowhere to go, and you don't raise your voice at me in my house. Emily grabbed her bag. Fine. Live with him. For me, you're not my mother anymore. You're a disgrace. The door slammed so hard, the china rattled in the cabinet. Margaret swayed. Ryan caught her. Easy, he whispered. They're gone. Now it's just us. She leaned into his chest. She knew she had lost her daughter, her reputation, her self-respect. But his warmth was the only real thing left. Portion 3 US English adaptation to 770 words. A month passed. Time inside the apartment thickened, stretched, as if every day was waiting for an ending that refused to arrive. Margaret rarely went outside. When she did, conversations stopped. Some neighbors crossed the street, others pretended not to see her. The bench in the courtyard remained, no longer loud, no longer accusatory, just silent, like a witness that didn't need to speak. Ryan settled in. He called it putting things in order. He said money had to be watched, that her pension wasn't enough for unnecessary spending. He decided what groceries to buy, what meals to cook, when they would eat. To Margaret, it all sounded reasonable. Or she needed it to sound that way. Arguing required energy she no longer had. One afternoon, she came out of the bathroom and saw him sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in his hand. What are you doing? She asked quietly. It rang, Ryan said without looking up. Emily. Margaret felt a sharp, sudden ache in her chest. Why didn't you answer? I didn't. I deleted the call, he said calmly. No point upsetting you. Your blood pressure can't handle stress. Margaret stood still. You deleted a call from my daughter? Ryan finally looked at her. His eyes were different now. No careful softness, just distance. Ownership. Your pressure is high, Margaret, he said. Take your pill and lie down. I'll handle things. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten her. He said it like a simple fact. As if it had always been this way. As if it had always been this way. Margaret went to the window. Linda sat alone on the courtyard bench. When she noticed Margaret, she turned her head sharply away, deliberately. Margaret looked down at her hands. They were shaking. She knew what would happen that night. Ryan would bring the ointment. He would say her back was tight, that it needed rubbing, and she would close her eyes. Stay still, like always. He came up behind her and rested his chin on her shoulder. Did you make the tea? He asked lazily. Yes, she replied, her voice hollow. Steam rose from the cup and disappeared into the dim kitchen light. The wall clock ticked steadily. Each second landed like confirmation. Margaret thought briefly about how she had arrived here. There hadn't been one clear decision, no single moment where everything shattered. It was a slow accumulation, silence layered on silence, exhaustion piled on fear, the terror of being alone outweighing every warning sign. That night, as Ryan rubbed the ointment into her back with the same practiced routine, she realized something that tightened her throat. She no longer knew whether the pain was real or whether it was something she needed to keep everything the same. "Don't move," he said. "It won't work if you do." She didn't move. She thought of Emily, of her grandchildren, of the word disgrace bouncing through the building like something dirty no one wanted to touch. She thought of Victor, his quiet, how he had slowly erased her without ever raising his voice. And she thought of the truth she was most afraid to admit. She was no longer alone, yet she had never felt so confined. The next morning, Ryan announced he would handle the finances from now on, said it was better that way, said she got confused. Margaret nodded. When she wanted to argue, her head hurt. When she wanted to cry, nothing came. Everything slowed. One Sunday afternoon, the landline rang. Ryan answered from the kitchen. "No," he said. "No one by that name lives here." He hung up. Margaret watched him. "Who was it?" she asked. "Nobody," he said. "Telemarketer." She knew he was lying. She didn't ask again. Later that day, Linda walked past the apartment door and left a bag of trash on the doormat. She didn't say a word. The gesture was small and heavy with contempt. Ryan picked it up and tossed it over the back fire escape. "Crazy old woman," he muttered. "She doesn't exist." Margaret leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. She closed her eyes. For the first time, she thought about leaving, packing a bag, knocking on doors, asking for help. The idea lasted seconds. Where would she go? To whom? To hear "It's too late" spoken out loud? That night, after Ryan turned off the light and lay down, Margaret stared at the ceiling. The clock kept ticking. Each second marked something she had chosen not out of love, not out of desire, but out of fear. She had gained what she feared losing most, company. And in that gain lay her punishment. She was not alone. But that not being alone was worse than death.